Hi everyone. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Nanati. I graduated from Atsara University by last year of February. I'm very happy to be here. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of CV writing, resume writing, and cover letters, and how they should be used by um, those in medicals as medicine. And then we're going to make it a bit interactive, and then I'm gonna get your questions and answer them. That way it will be more fruitful rather than me presenting.
دكتور دمتش يتسمى አይደለም ጀመረሽ ከሆነ
Oh, okay. Hi. So I think I was muted. Yara ነበር. Okay. I think አሁን ይሰማል.
yes ይሰማ
Okay, good. So I'm gonna start again. Hi everyone, Nanati Palalo. I graduated from Atsara University by February of 2024, and I currently work at the International Institute for Primary Healthcare, managing the community platform. So today we're gonna talk about a little bit about CVs, resumes, and cover letters all in all. Um, so essentially what a CV and resume is your first gateway into the door. It's your first impression. It's how you make an impression. So whenever you're going for that job that you want, or you're going for that fellowship that you want, for the internship that you want, or for that part-time role that you're thinking about, uh, essentially what you're expected to send is your CV first, and then that person is going to just review your CV, and if they like it, they will call up and upon you, and then via interviews and so forth, you can make your impression. But that CV is what gets you into the door, and a lot of the times, even the smallest mistakes, such as like fonts or alignment, can break or make your entry, because as we know, there are a lot of applicants, so there's no way to know, and employers are really looking to minimize the amount of applicants they have to see and they have to interview. So your CV, if there is any kind of formatting or fonting issues, that could also hint that you don't have any attention to detail, so that can give them a bad impression and they can just throw it out. The second is professional story. When you design your CV, make it seem like you're telling a story. So, for instance, someone in marketing, when they design their CV, has more, that has a lot of designs, it has a lot of engaging material, because through their CV they're selling a story that they're very equipped in graphic design, they're very equipped in marketing, so that's what they sell. So make sure that your CV is telling the story that you want to tell, and you have to cater it into the audience, into the specific organizations that you're sending it to. Sometimes you might make it compressed, you might make it only roles that that aligns with their goals and missions, and sometimes you might add a lot more into it. So when you're designing a CV for education, for instance, that's like when you're applying for graduate schools, then you don't know what detail is not to put, so you put a lot of details in, whether that's your educational experience, your research experience, your work experience, your part-time roles, your volunteers, everything has to be written, because they want to see overall what you're like. So that kind of CV has to be very extensive. But more or less, when you're applying for a job, maybe you have to cater it into that job. So if you're going for a clinical job, what you might want to mention is a couple of research on your CVs and a couple of clinical experience in your CVs, and you may not add a lot of other details, other extra details in your CV that's seeking a clinical lore, because you have to gear it into a clinical picture. So make sure when you're telling that story, it's fitting into the audience. So CVs in medicine, for instance, when you see residency programs, they do a lot of CV reviews. So after you take the exams, you have to also attach your CV, and then you're also vetted based on your CVs and recommendations. So that's the thing. When you're applying for research grants, even if you have killer proposals, you still have to attach your CV, and they will review your CV to see if you're equipped to conduct that research, if you're equipped to handle that kind of financial grants or not. So that's also important. That's where you take it. For fellowships, a lot of fellowships in medicine, we have that. So CVs are important to get those roles as well. And again, I already talked about grad schools applications. If you're applying for grad schools anywhere, you need to design a very good CV that tells the admissions officer what you're about, what you've done, and what you've learned from all of that experience. So making sure the CV tells all that experience is up to you. So what is the essential difference between a CV and a resume? So CV is basically your career encyclopedia. So this just basically means it's a bit vast, it's a bigger. It could be like more than 2 pages. It's not really compressed. You can add a lot of details. Maybe if you have one work experience, you might go into detail of explaining that work experience either by bullet point or by a paragraph. So that depends. For instance, if you're doing a residency application, then each description of the role or job you've done, it has to be written in a paragraph point of view. But if you're applying for grad schools or for job applications, then it has to be written on a bullet point. But you have to describe each role that you've put as a professional experience, each education that you've put. You have to explain it in vast. So a CV could go up to 6 pages, 7 pages, just depends. And when you ask for a resume, the resume is usually a pager. It's like 1 page. So you can just it's a good example that's written here. Resume is your movie trailer. So say your entire experience is your movie, then the trailer is the resume. So the resume is very just shortened story. So it's just a few line detail of a professional experience, maybe a bit of leadership experience and education experience, and you may not add a lot of volunteering experience, part-time experience, because they're only looking for 1 pager, and you're trying to be as very specific as possible to get that audience's attention. So that's the major difference between the two things. So when you're formatting, whether that's a CV or resume, there are key rules to take. You have to have consistent fonts. For instance, if you make sure your titles are like the size of the fonts is, for instance, let's say you decided to be 12, and then the sections. So the title is 12, then the subsections are 11. You have to continue on that consistency throughout the whole CV format. The margins have to match, the headings have to match. So make sure that alignment is matching, because if at any point, if you're using one Times Roman and the other is Calibri, they can tell. You can tell by looking at the CV itself that it's different fonts and it's different font sizes, and they will say that, okay, this person has not paid attention to their CV. So how would they really pay attention to the little details at the workplace? So that kind of shows them that you're not observant. The other is reverse chronological order. So when you write your CV, make sure that you're writing it from the most recent up to the oldest. So if you're, for instance, if you're listing out your education, start with your undergrad degree, and then after undergrad, you go to your high school, and then elementary, and then you don't necessarily have to go. For instance, if you have not gotten your undergrad degree yet, you can just say undergrad degree and then start the time that the undergrad degree began and say up to current, and then maybe you could add the next to be high school degree. But if you've already finished undergrad, you don't necessarily have to write your high school. Your undergrad degree is enough as an education. They don't really need to see where you went to high school, where you went to elementary school. So it depends. If you're still doing your undergrad, but you can add your high school degree to just show them that you've already finished one education. And then use chronological order. So this would mean for job experience as well, just go from the most recent and then go year by year up to the oldest. So if you're not using chronological order, if one says this was done in 2024, and their next says it was done the current one, and then the next says it's done 2002, it's just all over the place. It just gives the whoever's looking at your CV will just immediately discard it and will not go and dive deep into what that role was, what you've contributed to the company in that role, and etc. So just these small details actually do matter. You can bold your headings, you can italicize something. So if you're just adding it, for instance, research that you did and you want to cite something and you want to do the citation in italic, that's something that you can do. That's good. But I always say don't over design your CV, especially in medicine. That's not something that's required of you. Even if you present a very clean, very readable, very understandable, and very simple CV, it still adheres to the margins, the headings, the fonts. It's still a very, very good CV from the eyes of an employer. So like I said, just have clear sections. So make sure, okay, this section is for education. This section is for my professional experience. This section is, because we're in medicine, we also have a separate section saying clinical research. If you've done any research experience, if you've done any publications, you can add a section for publications. And then in the publications, you can even do peer-reviewed publications if those publications have gotten any journal publications. You can say oral presentations if you've not published anything, but you've presented an abstract on any conference, whether that's online or in person. You can also add it to your CV saying that you presented this abstract there. And then even if you haven't published any research, but you're working on a research, you can add that in as a research and under work or draft research or something. So you could do a peer-reviewed publication, you can do oral presentation, and you can do publication under preparation. So those things can still be added to your CV. So as a tip, normally what kind of fonts should we use? Usually Calibri and Times New Roman is good acceptable fonts that you can use. Arials can also be used. So the three fonts you can use. The font size that is preferred to the eye is from 10 to 12 font size. And the margins that you should use for CV are 1 inches. And always, always, always submit your CVs as PDF. A CV that's submitted as Word doc is not really appealing because a lot of people have different readers, and sometimes for you it might look aligned everything, but when you send it to an employer and they're opening it by their own reader, everything might be all over the place. So just PDFs make sure that it stays intact the way you wanted it to stay intact. And a lot of the mistakes that I see from prospective applicants is they submit CVs as an image. That's the worst thing that can happen, because sometimes they want to copy paste some of your credentials into a scaling or a scoring sheet. Then they can't do that if you're submitting something as an image. So they would have to manually write every detail that's written on your CV, and it's just very manual work, and generally emails are not they're not acceptable. You should always submit CVs as a PDF. And the last thing, as I would emphasize, is do not print your CV and then take a picture of that printed image or scan it and then send it as a CV. That's just hectic. Just submit a PDF as a CV is always the good way to go. Okay. So what should you include on your CV? What should you include on your resume? So in the contact information, that's the first section of your CV. So in your first section, that's basically what your personal information. Add your name, emails, important. If you have a work email, add a work email. Because you guys are students, I'm sure you have the AAU email. So I would say you add that email in. But if you don't use the AAU email, and if you're using the personal email, always add the personal email, because that's the email they will always contact you in regards information. So add it. Just make sure that's the email that you frequently use. And I would say edit your email address. So a lot of the email address says, like, they use very unprofessional names, like so this kind of names that are not professional, especially for your CV. So make sure that you edit your email to make it seem more professional. Just has your full name into it or your first name into it, and I would suggest. But if you use your university email, that's always the best one. The other is phone. It's very important. And LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn is considered a very professional account, I would, at first, I recommend everyone to create a LinkedIn account, because that's still a professional account, and a lot of employers actually go into your LinkedIn, check out your LinkedIn as part of the uh, CV profiling. So adding your LinkedIn is something that we recommend, but it's still optional. The other, don't add date of birth in your CV. Don't add unnecessary information such as where you live. Address is not really necessary. Maybe you could do like Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, but you don't necessarily have to go into where the street is or your home number is. That's not unnecessary information. And you really want to make your CV as less, you don't want to create any bias by an employer. So bias, we all have biases. I will have bias, you will have your own bias. So an employer will also have bias. So what you're trying to do is, but when you give them your CV, you're trying to avoid that bias. They've never looked at you, they've never spoken to you, so they don't want to have that bias when they're evaluating your credentials. So don't add gender, don't add pictures, because pictures can create a lot of bias about some people. So so the things that I've outlined here are the things to include on your CV. The other is, then after you're done with your contact information, you go into your education. So in your education, include the most recent education you've gotten. That is, if there is an ongoing education, you can add it in, and then if the most recent, add that in. You can add GPA if you feel like your GPA will make you stand out. If you have a very high GPA, adding it will add value into your CV. But if you don't necessarily have a very good GPA, you don't have to add it in, and an employer is not going to say, where is the GPA? Because it's not really a requirement. You only add it in to add value. And then after education, you add research experiences. So this is specifically centered to medicine. If you're applying for residency applications, or if you're maybe applying for jobs in clinical, you might add research experiences. So in research experiences, be specific. So if you because you're doing CV and CV is a bit extended, you can add the research name that you did. You can cite use proper citations to add that research experience, but tell them what you contributed in that regard. Were you did you assist in the conceptualization of that research? Were you editing that research? So what did you exactly do to that research? Is something that, or were you involved in the data collection? So what was your role in that? You could add. The other is, if you've done any clinical rotations or experience, you can add that. This is where your experience would come in. So having worked as maybe as a medical intern in the hospital that you're currently working on, you could add it here as an experience. Whether that's ongoing or not, you should still add it. And then I do a lot of this. I do leadership and volunteering experience, and I do it separately. For instance, I go to Macedonia and volunteer my time. I do a lot of sessions with road clubs where I do medical screening. So those roles are more or less on volunteering. So I add them to volunteering. But the jobs that I do at WHO level as a youth council member, or the roles I played as an IMSA and IFMSA, uh, all those roles are leadership roles. So although they're not, I don't qualify the FMSA and the IMSA work as professional work outside, because I didn't graduate yet and hadn't graduated yet. So it wasn't really a work experience per se, professional work experience, but it's still a work experience and still should be added into your CV. So what I do is I add a leadership section and then add what I did in each organizations and add it as a I list them out. And then I do the volunteering where I do the health screenings or the book donations, and every volunteering job that I do as a group, I add it into a different section saying volunteering, and then I add them there. And then you can add any certification and courses that you've gotten. So if you've taken any online courses, whether that's on LinkedIn or whether you took them personally, it's good to add them as a course. So add them there. And then the last section of your CV is language and skills. So when you do languages, we already know like how proficient you are in speaking and writing and listening and reading. So I think a lot of CV formats have that. Um, when it comes to skills, a lot of people say when they write skills, they do leadership skills, they say communication skills, but those skills are something that are developed over time. And when you say leadership skills, why did you say that you had leadership skills? You must have held a lot of leadership roles. You must have developed that skill over time. Other than that, just saying it to you're just saying it to say it. So actually write the skills that you know that you do have. So leadership skills could be a pretty vague. Even I don't add leadership skills in my CV because I'm still not there yet in that aspect. I would say maybe somebody that has taken a leadership course and that has done a lot of his maybe masters with the certification on leadership, or has done a lot of leadership trainings as a way of as a means of living, and had a lot of experience leading multi-sectoral organizations, international, national organizations. That person can have leadership skills. But for us, we're still developing that skill, so it would be hard to say that I have leadership skills. But you could do like problem solving skills, you can say, and you can, if you had that, so just tangible something, a skill that you can further elaborate during an interview process is something to add, instead of writing very vague terms that a lot of people use. But maybe if you're very good at coding, you could add it as a skill. If you're very good at writing, you could add it as a skill. So just this concurrent skills that you are able to showcase and prove are things that you want to add as a skill. And on your resume, basically your resume is a shortened version of a CV. The contact information stays the same as the CV section, and you would need to add a summary statement, just a very brief summary about who this person that's applying is. For instance, Dr. Nanati is dash 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 dash. She graduated from dash dash dash, and she is currently working dash dash dash, and she aims to do this. So I can just do this in a 4-line summary, and then that's done. So this is very optional, but it just gives the person reading your CV or your resume an opportunity to get a brief overview of who you are, because you can only say so much in one page. And when you detail out your experience, your professional work experience, make sure you focus on impact that are very quantifiable, that align a lot with the goals and objective of the employer. So you only add roles that you know is going to be relevant to the job that you're applying for, or to the internship, or to the fellowship, or to the research grant you're applying for. Just make sure you only add those experiences that are relevant, and you don't necessarily add the rest here, because they're asking for a resume, because they want it as very condensed and shortened version. Okay. So again, when I told you like there are things not to include, the first thing is personal photos. This is something that will create a lot of bias. Like I said, it could create gender bias, it could create religious bias, it can create even a lot of, we have an internal bias that we don't even recognize yet. So by adding that in, you're just shooting yourself in the head basically. So don't add photos on your CV. And it's very important not to add any irrelevant jobs. So for instance, if you've done the rule is, if you don't add things that are 10 years prior. So I can no longer add my high school experiences because they're no longer relevant. It's been 8 years since I left high school, so I cannot add any volunteer roles I had, any education that I did in high school, because I've had a lot of experience after that. So I'm only supposed to write things in relation to that. So unless, or if you're adding those high school related jobs, and you must have tried to say something. You could tie it to your communication skills, public speaking skills. For instance, if you want to talk about Toastmasters, and you say like you've done that since high school, you might add it. So it has to be relevant into what you're saying, and you have to tie it into a soft skill. Unless and otherwise, it's really not relevant to add it in your CV. Okay. So now that we've discussed CV and resume writing, now we have what we call a cover letter. So employers, when you go into the workforce, you'll see they will ask you to attach a cover letter with your resume. So this is basically a letter to your employer, telling them why they should hire you, what who you are, what you would bring into the table, and basically what you would contribute to them, and in return what they would contribute to you. So you have to give them a very compelling one-page letter, and your employer will read that letter and will decide if they want to take a look at further into your documents, into your CV, if they want to call you for an interview or not. So the structure of a cover letter is, it has introduction, it has the body, the paragraphs, usually one or two paragraphs added, and then a conclusion. So it's very simple, very one pager. So introduction, why you're writing. So if you're applying for a job, this is, my name is da, 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 and I am applying for this job that's advertised on your website. And so this is how you introduce yourself. And then you go into body paragraphs. When you go into your paragraphs, you have to highlight your one or two key experiences that align with the organization's mission and vision, and also with the role's expectations. So try to tie it in and try to, because I've worked in this organization, that experience, because I worked in this organization, and I've gotten this kind of experience, and I feel like this is the experience that you're looking for, with the roles and expectations that they've set in their call out. So this is how I believe it aligns with that call. So you have to tie it together in your body or paragraph, and then you conclude. When you're concluding, you have to be very kind. You have to thank them. You have to show them appreciation for reviewing your documents, and tell them that you're very eager to hear back from them, and then you end it like that. So that's introduction, body, paragraph. What I would say is, cover letter is for you to further explain yourself, to further create an image in the employer, uh, make yourself stand out, but it's not an opportunity to basically repeat whatever your CV has said. That would just be very, very boring to the reader, because that employer could have just gone into your CV and could have easily gotten that information. So what you're trying to tell him through the cover letter is explain what they wouldn't necessarily understand from going through your CVs. It's telling them why they should hire you, by taking out one line from the CV and further explaining that. And it's also although it's an opportunity for you to convince them, you have to make sure you stand out, personalize the cover letters. So if you go to Canva, you'll find a lot of cover letters that are templates, and a lot of people, when they apply, they actually use those cover letters as template and they send it in. What happens is employers are reviewing 100 and 100 cover letter every day. If yours doesn't stand out, it will just seem robotic and will just chunk in into all other cover letters, and then you've missed your opportunity to sell yourself. So use that cover letter to show your personality. If you have to spice it up by giving a personal story, by trying to showcase your humor, your empathy, and whatever you feel like that job requires, you can do so through the story that you're telling through the cover letter. And before you write the cover letters, like I said, there are a lot of templates. You can just copy paste a template and just replace the organization and the role that you're applying for. But that's a very bad idea. What I would say is, before writing a cover letter, go and research the institution, go and research the employer, go and research the actual role that you're applying for, and see what that role is expected of you, like what is the educational expectation, what is the work experience expectation, and what are the day-to-day things that are expected of you. They would ideally write the ideal candidate would have this, and the ideal candidate would do this. So they will tell you what your day-to-day job is. So after reading all that and internalizing it, then you write a letter to the employer selling yourself. So as a bonus, when you're tailoring your CV, when you're doing your CV, your cover letters, your resumes, make sure you always tailor your documents. There's no one size fit all sort of documents. So for me, for instance, I have over, I think, 6 separate CVs, and I use those CVs for different scenarios. So my clinical CV is completely different from a CV that I've designed for a public health role, and my CV that I've designed for a consulting role is completely different. So, and I also have like very shortened versions of a CV itself, because there are some organizations that require a CV but tell you that the CV cannot be more than 3 pages long. So you have to shorten it. And some employers say, and not necessarily employers, maybe if you're applying for research, for grants, and for grad school applications, they will tell you to have a very exhaustive CV. So that CV might require you to have 10 pages and so. So make sure you have different variety of CVs, and whenever there are opportunities, you can just pick one CV and just adjust it a little bit and then send it in. So it's very time consuming, time saving as well. And when you write your CVs, like I said, you say specifically for CVs, when you say like I was the standing committee of professional exchange general assistant for FMSC, so I can just write that role. But because it's a CV and not a lot of people know what Standing Committee of Professional Exchanges or what IFMSA is, I would really need to emphasize what I did in that organization and what I contributed to that organization. By reading that, they're able to emphasize to think that, okay, she's going to do the same thing for me and for my organization as well. So when you say that, just use action verbs. Say, I implemented this, I coordinated this, I developed this, I led this. So that action verbs makes you accountable, makes you look responsible, makes you look like you have that problem solving qualities that they're looking for. So when you're given the opportunity to showcase what you actually did in that job, in that role, don't make it very boring. Don't use paragraphs, because they will not read that probably. So just make it a bullet point, and the bullet point should begin with action verbs, so that if you start with they wouldn't be that intrigued. But if you start with an action verb, they'll very much be intrigued. And it's always good to have a very big CV. So like a master CV, we would call it. So a master CV is just like a very extended 10 pages CV, and then you adopt and cut down CVs from there, and just have like mini CVs from there. So keep a master CV, and then you can design and edit out and adjust CVs for multiple roles and for multiple audiences. So just one CV that has everything, every job you've ever had, every volunteering that you've ever done, every leadership role you've taken, every research that you've conducted, and that would be the master CV. And then you would adjust it accordingly for each organization and for each type of role that you're doing. And because we're in the digital era, make sure you take online tools very seriously. So Canva has its own CV layout, but this is usually for non-academic roles. So for medicine, it may not be appropriate to use Canva. But Canva does have a layout for CV sets. I just wanted you to know that. And if you want to check your grammar, if you're very unsure about your grammar, you can always use Grammarly to check your grammar. And Europass for beginners. So, fun fact: my first CV was actually Europass. I was a third year medical student. I was C1 at the time. So the first CV that I created was using Europass, and Europass made my life very, very easy because all you need to do is just add in your details, and then the design, the alignment, the fonts, and everything is going to be designed by Europass itself. And then once you feel like you've got the hang of it, you can go design your own CV. So that's I wanted you to know about Europass. The other is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually good. You could tell ChatGPT what you did in one set of organization, and then tell ChatGPT to generate a brief description as a bullet point with action verbs, and then ChatGPT will generate like she did this and she coordinated this, she researched this. So that action verb that you're looking for with bulleted explanation for each job can be generated by ChatGPT as well. So you can also make use of that as I would suggest. Um, so before we go for questions, maybe I would tell you about my personal experience with CV. So I'm sorry about the cough. My brother is next to me. That's why. So for CVs, I told you my first CV was Europass. I did it during third year of medical school. That was also around the time that I created a LinkedIn account, and then I used my CVs for a lot of roles. I think I used I took a I had a lot of people request my CV while I was in medical school, as opposed to when I left medical school. Because during medical schools, I was applying for a lot of internships, for a lot of leadership roles, for a lot of grants, and a lot of them required CVs. So through grants actually did save my life. And then after graduation, and I went into the job market, I used my first job application was I used Europass again, and I think it was 2 weeks out of medical school that I was offered a lot of jobs. So I in on the first interview I had after leaving medical school, that was like 2 weeks after graduation. I had my first interview, and in that interview, the conversation we've had was in regards to they read my CV and they asked about the soft skills that I gained while I was in medical school with IMSA and with FMSA, what I did and how I contributed to that. So I know you don't necessarily feel like what you do in medical school may not matter, but it does matter. It does open a lot of doors more than you know, and while I was out, I had by the time I graduated, I already had a CV. I already knew how to design a CV. I already knew how to cater CVs and shorten and design CVs to fit into what each organization wanted. And a lot of my counterparts had a lot of difficulty even coming up with CVs and designing CVs. And I even had my classmates think transcripts and your license and your degrees are part of a CV, but they're necessarily not. You have to design that CV, that one line resume, that one page resume, or that's a 3-page CV. That's a separate thing. And this unnecessary transcripts, the recommendations, and the license, that's our additional documents that you can take with you. But a lot of the times at the job application, they only require the CV at first, and only if after they've liked you and they have vetted you, then they require the additional documentations just for HR purposes. But a lot of the times, what gets you into the door is CV. And after I got my first job and was working on the job, I was interviewing a lot of applicants for a role in our company, And while interviewing a lot of the roles, we were vetting applicants. So when we sent out calls for jobs, we usually had like more than 100 applicants within 2 days and so forth. So we couldn't interview all 400 applicants. So what we would do is look at their CVs. And if there was alignment issues, that was a point for elimination. If CVs are submitted as images, that was point for elimination. If CVs had different colorings, different fonts, different sizes, that was still points for elimination. So because what that sends to the employer is you didn't take enough time to look at your CV, to edit your CV, to make it presentable to the employer. So hence you don't really care enough to apply for the job correctly. You just picked up one CV and copy pasted it and added it. So that's one thing. The other I would say is I also had an applicant apply, and she applied with a cover letter, and on the cover letter is a ChatGPT generated cover letter. And how we knew it is ChatGPT, when you ask it to generate a cover letter, it will say, okay, I've generated a cover letter based on your request, and starts the cover letter. So when she copy pasted it, she copy pasted the prompt as well from ChatGPT, so we could read that as a part as well. So that also led to elimination. But the reason for elimination was not that she used ChatGPT. We all know a lot of people use ChatGPT. The reason is she didn't care enough to edit it, to reread it, and to proofread and make sure there was nothing going on. So that went into question, okay, that person does not have any attention to detail, hence after we hire her, she's going to be a problem or going into the future. So because we don't know applicants at a personal level, we don't know you, we've never worked with you, so the only conversation we're having is with your CV. So a lot of the times that will break or end that door for you. So you want that door to open for you, and after you're in through your interview, you have the potential to impress them, and while working together with them, you also have a potential to impress them. But that's what opens the door for you is your CV. So it's what tells your story on behalf of you where you're not there. So I would say really give it attention when you tailor your CVs for different applications, because it does truly matter. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take one.
Thank you, Doctor. It was a wonderful session. I think በደንብ እንድንረዳ አድርገሽናል from the employer as well as from the employee's perspective. So the audience, if you have any questions, let's have 5 to 10 minutes. You can write it in the chat box, or you can raise your hands and we can take your questions. Thank you.
Hi, Usman. You can ask.
Okay, thank you for the chance. Can I use Amharic or?
No, you can't. Already.
ኦኬ ሲቪ ላይ ማለት ነው። በመጀመሪያ ፕሬዘንት ያደረግሽበትን ወይ በጣም ወድጄዋለሁ። ቴንክ ዩ በጣም። ከዛ በመቀጠል ደግሞ ያለኝ ጥያቄ አባውት ፎቶ ኦን ዘ ሲቪ ማለት ነው። ማለት አይ ቶት ኢት ዋዝ ቬሪ ጉድ አይዲያ ቱ አድ ማይ ፎቶ ኦን ማይ ሲቪ በት ናው ዩ አር ሴይንግ ፎቶ ማስገባት በጣም ጥሩ ያልሆነ ነገር ምናምን ማለት ነው። ሶ ያንን ነገር ትንሽ ዲስከስ ብናደርግ ደስ ይለኛል። ብታብራሪልኝ።
ኦኬ ሶ አሁን ለምሳሌ ሊንክድን አሁን ምን ሆኗል ብያቸዋለሁ። ኢትስ ፕሮፌሽናል ሲቪ ሆኗል። ሲቪያችሁን አዳርጋችሁ ለራሱ ሊንክድናችሁ ላይ ሄደው ያያሉ። ሎት ኦፍ ኦርጋናይዜሽንስ ስፔሻሊ ኢንተርናሽናል ኦርጋናይዜሽን ከሆኑ ሲቪያችሁን ሳያዩ አይቀጥላችሁ ሎት ኦፍ ታይምስ ሶ that's you're looking for ይሄ በስቱዲዮ ፎቶ ስቱዲዮ ተነስታችሁ that portrait photo that you have, you can add it to a LinkedIn account that they will still check that out. But it's not advised on a CV. It's really not advised. You don't know what barriers you will have. ደስ የለውም ብለው ራሱ employers can just እንትንስ ሊከቱት ይችላሉ፣ እንደ ትራሽ ባክ ሊከቱት ይችላሉ። a lot of the times ደግሞ ምንድነው ቢግ ኦርጋናይዜሽን ላይ ሲኢኦ ሌቭል አይደርስም your CV። መጀመሪያ ኤችአር ነው vet የሚያደርገው። ኤችአር አውጥቶ ከዛ ሪከመንድ የሚያደርገውን ብቻ ለይቶ ነው ከዛ በኋላ ሃየሪንግ ማኔጀሩ ጋር ወር ሲኢኦ ጋር የሚያስገባልን። ሶ እዛ ስቴጅ እስኪደርስ ድረስ ቤዝድ ኦን your facial appearance alone into bias and I've seen that happen a lot of the times where even me I had after I was hired my first job I was recommended for the role CV ተላኩኝ CV ታይቶ ምናምን የጠራሁትና ኢንተርቪው ከገባሁ በኋላ interview like we had a discussion with my boss and the interview went very well. We liked his way of thinking. I understood he liked the way I thought, so he thought okay we could work really well, and that was it. But then in in our conversation he said prior to your interview, while actually reviewing your CV, but I had like to show that better. I didn't think that you were good enough. When I asked him why, he said my picture created a bias in his head. It came from it could be because I was a female, it could be because I was a Muslim, it could be anything. Whatever created the bias created that bias in his head, where he thought I may not be very cooperative, may easygoing. This is personal bias. Is it wrong? It is wrong, but it exists, and we can't really then you can't pretend that it doesn't exist. And then that bias, that's the first impression bias. No, during the interview process, because they will actually get to know you, and the initial perception bias completely remove it. So why do that? You don't have the opportunity to present yourself very well. Rasan explain but opportunity rasan defend CV no na. Why let your CV to push you aside so I'm saying adding a profile picture and then a profile photo, but professional photo add character, it might add that professional thing that you're looking for, but not for a lot of people. Okay, professional add value direction. Then empty CV btaskaba very structured, you want a clean, you want to see type but clean look yallo to the point, every detail ታይቶ የተጻፈ CV የሚመስል CV ከተሰጠ without the picture it makes it look professional. Then if you add a picture to it, it might go either way, sideways ሊሄድ ይችላል ሁለቱ way። ግን without picture submit ብታረግ picture add አልተደረገም ተብሎ ምንም አይነት point አይወሰድብህም። It actually puts you in a safe slot. And it's really recommended not to add any more personal details that's than it's needed. Even like on social media accounts, your Facebook, your Instagram, and Twitter, there's no need, because it's not a professional account. They're not recognized as a professional account. Hence, they should not be added to your CV. Emails, communications alone. Everything that you add into your CV, value add maragallabet. Email communicates lamiaragono, phone kantaka communicates lamiaragono. LinkedIn, it's a professional account assume as a professional account artaragol. And then your name is just, it's a given. You're supposed to add it. Any other information, it's irrelevant. There's no need to add it. So that's the overall consensus. And this applies not just for job application, it's for any applications. Even for grad school application, for residency applications. You don't add it directly into your CV like picture. Again, grad school admission ሌሎች አፕሊኬሽን ላይ በዌብሳይት ምናምን ላይ አፕላይ ስታደርጉ they might add የራሳችሁን ፒክቸር ከተቱበት ይለው ሌላ ፎርም ላይ ያዘጋጁላችሁ ይችላሉ፣ ግን ሲቪ ላይ አትከተቱት ማለት ነው። You said picture cause some bias, but what if it creates some advantages? Do you have any experience about this? I don't personally have an experience with this, and I tried the Europass ላይ ደግሞ picture add ማድረግ ይቻል ነበረ ከተትን። ከዛ my employer told me this creates bias እና don't add it የሚባል ዲስከሽን ላይ ነበር። because I've never used a picture in my CV from then on መማሪያ አድርጌው ሄድኩኝ ማለት ነው። ግን it could create some advantages. I'm not saying it doesn't. Do you really want that? No, like if your picture is the one that's getting you through the door, then the advantage create karagarlatu. it's not really the kind of job that you want either way. You are hired for different reason. You heard about you. So again, በዛም ቢሆን it's not a good idea to add it. The other question, how do you build your LinkedIn profile account while you're a student? Every role that you hold as a leadership role, whether that's in a student council ይሁን ኢምሳም ይሁን አሁን እንደውም ብዙ አሶሲዬሽኖች የመጡ ነው። እዛ ላይ ሊደርሽፕ ሮል ከሰራችሁ ሪሰርች ኤክስፒሪየንስ ካላችሁ ኦር ቮለንቲር ያደረጋችሁ ሊንክድን ሃዝ a way to add እዛ ጋር እንዳለ ሶ መጀመሪያ ከፕሮፋይሊንግ ነው የሚጀምረው። Like just because you're a medical student, don't sell yourself too short. The first thing is profile picture option. Don't make it informally on a picture. Make sure it's a formal picture. Where you're dressed very well or you're standing in at least portrait picture. So that when they look at you profile to say, okay, this is immediately inexperienced to know below that watch one format picture. Because talk about your experiences. አሁን ለምሳሌ የሆነ ሰሚናር attend አድርጋችሁ ሊሆን ይችላል። እናት የትምህርት ቤት ሰሚናር ማለት ነው። like ወጣችሁ የሆነ ሰሚናር ኢቨንት attend አድርጋችሁ ሊሆን ይችላል። የሆነ ሪካፕ አድርጋችሁ ፖስት ብታደርጉት it's also still increasing engagement. The issue with students issue Ethiopia issue. No, we don't talk about the things we do. It's very important. It's part of advocating yourself, selling yourself to people. So you have to actively talk about the things that you're doing so people know. We no longer we're in an era. It's because an employer knows you. ያውቃቸዋል። ስለዚህ when a job opens up, okay, that person is the right fit for this role. ራሱ reach out የሚያደርግበት era ላይ ደርሰናል። That only happens when you continuously market yourself, talk about what you did. ይሄን ሰራው፣ ይሄን ተማርኩኝ ብትሉ ማለት ነው። So I would say LinkedIn ላይ ማርኬት የምታደርጉ እንደዛ ነው። እኔ አሁን I used to always events ከሄድኩኝና if I speak at an event, I will recap that event on my LinkedIn post, or if I'm writing something, an article, says an article recap on about LinkedIn. And I wasn't when I was a student, I didn't really actively talk a lot because it felt like big people space ነበር የሚመስለኝ ነበር LinkedIn, because if I go in that space and not talk about it, they would what if I'm ridiculed, what if I'm too embarrassed? It's just taking that first leap of faith, no? Everyone will somehow, some way, you'll find people relating to your posts. So I would say just continuously posting about the things that you're doing is one way to grow your LinkedIn account while you're a student. Leila question, are there any other questions?
We have about 3 minutes before we end the session. If you have any questions, chat box ላይ ጻፏቸው ወይም እጃችሁ ጠይቁ።
for this amazing session. እና እንደ ስኮሚም ልንሰራበት እየሞከርን ያለው አንድ ኤም ምንድነው ሜዲካል ስቱደንትስ ዌል ራውንድድ የሆነ ኖሌጅ እና ደግሞ ስኪል ይዘው እንዲወጡ በቻለን አቅም ሲሪስ እያዘጋጀን እንገኛለን. and this is one of the sessions in line, so I hope the rest of you will catch up and ሌሎቹንም ሴሽኖቻችንን አቴንድ ታደርጉልናላችሁ. Apart from that, thank you so much. If possible, everyone can open their camera and then and picture nostalgia, if that's okay with you.
Before that, አንድ ጥያቄ ተነስቶ ነበረ in the chat box. Any advice for those of us in medical school and not in Addis and don't have many opportunities for volunteering or to do other activities that could help us build our resume?
Okay. I, I understand there is limitations, from outside of Addis and compared to Addis. You can also make your own opportunities wherever you are. I think in a lot of places, there are still opportunities to volunteer to make an impact. ግን ከሌሉ you're already seeing a problem. ዲፌክቶች እያየሽ ነው. So one quality of somebody that's a leader that's going to make a change in someday is being able to identify that problem and finding a solution for that. So create something. We're seeing so many organizations flourish. I'm seeing medical students graduating and then they're creating their own nonprofits, which I'm very proud of. We're seeing a lot of medical students that were told to be doctors ending up entrepreneurs. We're seeing they created their own data coding agency with a tech completely tech honor. So we have a lot of as students, medical students, we have a lot of talent that we can channel and make use of. So I say, if you recognize a problem and Zayan problem fixing the organization or volunteer create one yourself. Take the initiative to create something. Create era later. So I say go for that. I think as an example, all the time is on Gondar Live, we have like variety of Rotary clubs that are created. Royal Nabaru, for medical students, Pichahono, Rotary clubs that have in different parts of the country. Zero Rotary clubs implemented. Initially, Nabaru Rotary club, Habsawa Nabara, Hanus Nabari Nabara, Benyak created. A lot of regions are taking learning from that and creating their own organizations. So these are what happens. Kalila organization, make sure you create one yourself. I would say I know it's ambitious. There's nothing one can do. Medical students go on address. This is something that you can do. I would say creative mindset.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nanati, for the session and your advices as well. በጣም ነው የምናመሰግነው for joining us. So Raj እንዳለችው, if you can open your cameras, let's take one picture ከዛ በኋላ we'll be done with the session. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We're done. So stay tuned for our next session and good night.
Bye. Good night.